Hi, Kim. Glad you're with us again today.
Hello, glad to be here. Welcome to everybody who's joining the webinar today. And I just want to remind you to please ask questions if you're here, you have questions, and please feel free to interact. It makes the webinar that much better, and it's helpful, I think, more helpful to everyone than sometimes me just talking through it. So don't feel shy if you have a question. There's no wrong question around here. So my name's Kim Buck, like Tammy mentioned. I work in Mesa, Arizona at an agency where I'm a clinical director. We have a big program where we work with people who deal with sex addiction and their partners, an outpatient program. So my paradigm's a little bit that way. So if I say sex addiction or partners, that's probably just because that's what I'm most familiar with. But prodependence is wonderful because it really addresses partners with that are dealing with any addiction with a loved one or chronic mental illness. So all are welcome here, and I will try and adjust that to be inclusive of everyone. I am working with Dr. Rob with Prodependence and writing a workbook to accompany his book that will hopefully there'll be some publishing done this next year in 2020. So look out for that. Loved Prodependence when I heard it. I immediately resonated with it. I have lots and lots of years of my own healing work, and but it was all codependent based and hurtful, helpful with some of it, but also very hurtful. So was so excited to see somebody who had put into words, Dr. Rob had put into words what I had been thinking and kind of sitting on for years, and I'm so grateful for that. So that's what the perspective we're going to come from today at this webinar is, the prodependence perspective. So hopefully that will be useful and healing for you all as well. I don't know if we have any questions yet.
Not yet, but one of the things Kim and I were texting before the, sorry, I got texts coming in. I was going to just mute myself and there's more coming in. But we were talking about like, what are people asking about? What are people, talking about? And one of the things that I thought comes up fairly often is, like, I deserve to know this information. And, and then myself and others are going, but careful how you find it out. So one of the things I thought might be really helpful, and we do have a question now, but one of the things I thought might be really helpful to talk about a bit is, how do you, like, what should a partner or a loved one find out? How do we best manage this? How do they feel safe in the unknown, some of that, because I think timing and support and all of that, are really helpful. But it's so complex because it's like, well, I deserve to know. Yes, you do. But, so can you just talk a little bit about that and kind of like preparing for a disclosure, or how to not have as I call them, a vomit disclosure and all of that. So.
Absolutely. Such a great question, and it comes up a lot because the only way you can rebuild trust in a relationship is to have honesty, and you can't start to rebuild that trust until you know what it is you're dealing with. So as a partner, it can be really distressing to not have the information you need to make important decisions about the relationship, including, should I stay? Should I stick it out? Should I keep working? How serious is the acting out behavior? And I want to start reestablishing trust, so I have to know. The struggle that we find is that how I get that information, how that information is given to the partner from the addict or the struggling person is super important. Oftentimes the partner feels so betrayed and so hurt, and there's so much trauma going on that sometimes the partner will ask more detail than she or he wants. They think they want it, like, I want to know these details, and somehow that's going to make me feel safer, more safe. And what it does is create a whole library, sometimes extra library in my head of things I can fantasize and worry about, and that can cause me distress everywhere I go. And, so there's so much to getting this information and finding out the whole truth about what's been going on and the ways in which you've been lied to and deceived and betrayed. So my number one thing is to get a good therapist who can help you sort through that and figure out what is it that you exactly need to know, how much detail is healthy for you. And that might not be the same from person to person. Some person might need a lot more, one person might need a lot more detail than another person. So we do what's called and recommend what's called an addiction recovery work. We do full disclosures, where that's usually a session where both therapists, the partner and the spouse, the partner and the addicted one individual both meet together with their therapist, and it's usually a longer session than a normal session. Lots of preparation goes into a disclosure session. The addict gets really clear about his or her behavior, and with the help of a therapist and probably their support system, they figure out how to get honest. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen immediately for a lot of people. A lot of addicts are just drug into treatment in some ways, kind of kicking and screaming. They don't want to be there. And so they're not maybe ready to get honest, and that can be super painful for the partner. But the last thing you want is little pieces of information for a year. I would recommend that you get what important safety information you can early on. That might be what we call a pre-disclosure or a mini disclosure. That would really affect your safety physically, sexually, your health, your well-being. All of it matters, but there's some things that would, like for instance, if my partner's been having multiple affairs, I would need to know how many, was it protected, have you had STD testing? Those would be a health issue. That would be a major safety issue for a lot of partners. But then let the therapist and the addict work through the disclosure process and come up with a very clear disclosure where you can also put your questions, give your questions to his or her therapist, and they can help them answer those, figure out which ones are useful and not, and answer those as part of the disclosure. Also, your therapist can help you prepare for that. What to do before the disclosure, what to do during the disclosure, how to take care of yourself after the disclosure. Those are such important things. If you go to the addict and just start pummeling him or her with information and details, most likely out of their shame, they'll tell you. Oftentimes they'll tell you. And if they're deep in their addiction, they'll tell you more lies. So, and then if they told you the truth and you don't have that support system behind you and underneath, it can cause you to go further into trauma and will make living day to day even more difficult and painful. So support and getting help, disseminating that information and absorbing that information is what you want to do. Because you also want to create, if you're the partner, you want to create an environment where it's safe to be honest. And that's not your job per se, but best case scenario, if you can hold that space, even for some of the most painful pieces of information, that invites more honesty too. So, you know, the person who's betraying has ultimate responsibility for creating safety, but the partner listening, you want to find, you know, enough support and grounding that you can stay stable as you can and present as you can whenever they need to get honest about something that you've asked them to be honest about. I hope that's kind of what you were asking, but I think so.
Yeah, no, I really do think that that's useful because I totally understand, you know, if there's discovery, you know, then it is the, I need to know, I deserve to know. And, you know, I'm always going, you know, I want to protect you. It's not about protecting the addict. It's about protecting you because, you know, once you hear the stuff and the addict, first of all, is less likely to be truthful, even if they want to be truthful. most of the time they can't even, everything's so compartmentalized, they won't necessarily put all the dots together. So working with a trained therapist to help them gather the information, so the therapist can say, well, what about this? Oh yeah, I forgot about that, and so even if they want to be honest, which is challenging, if you're just getting, if I've been lying and I'm compartmentalized and I'm disconnected from things and I've got this behavior over here, but I love you over here, it's like, it's so discombobulated that that it's challenging to pull all that together. So having somebody that knows how to help them pull that together so that the partner's getting it in a practical, concise, factual manner, that's less likely to further traumatize. All of this is traumatizing, but it's less likely to cause further injury, and starts with a foundation, a place to get some honesty and a foundation on which to build. So, I really, and I 100% agree. If there's things like you need to go get STD tested because, absolutely, if there's like, okay, I've had an affair with this woman and she's stalking me, you need to know. I mean, whatever it is, if there's safety things, you absolutely do need to know. But I just always want the partners to have the support so that they can have the best outcome. So one, you don't want it like if they're just entering, like if they've just had discovery, they're not in recovery at all yet. There's zero recovery. So the chances of having this repeat over and over and over again is high. And so again, not optimal for either person. So, if we go, we've got a crisis here. How can we best manage the crisis so that these two people, can be supported and, hopefully find a path to healing individually, hopefully together, but, you never know. So.
Right. And I want to speak just for a second to what you were talking about being compartmentalized as an addict. That really is what happens. Like in order to carry on the deceit and the lies over here, I have to totally disconnect from the addiction to then be with my spouse or my family or my loved ones or whatever. So a lot of times, and if that's gone on for years and years without any checks and balances or haven't, what happens is sometimes they've got to figure out what's the truth and a lie. Sometimes there's a lack of even awareness about, and sometimes things get lost even in memory just because of, so again, none of these are excuses, but they're explanations as to why both need so much professional intervention in that process. And we've learned a lot over the years too about disclosure and, and we've learned how to create safety, those of us who are trained in this, how to create the best outcomes. So as tempting as it is to ask all those details, I would suggest when you're having one of those moments, call somebody who you can trust and run it by them first, or maybe want somebody in a support group or your therapist or somebody who has your back who can say, well, I don't know if I'd want to know that forever. You can't unknow something. You can't unhear some things. And the addict's mind is very messy. It's a lot of mess when they're in the addiction and they're sorting through the mess and figuring out what to keep and, them giving you the correct information may take some time. So be patient, do a lot of self-care, keep pushing for the disclosure when and if they're ready, work with the therapist. But yeah, we want to create as much safety as possible.
And I want to tag in because you mentioned those of you that are trained, and there's really a difference in training. I have to tell you, because even people, and we'll talk about CSATs, I still get emails from people who have reached out to CSATs who, are using a codependent model, are, blaming so it would, do your due diligence when you're looking for support for your loved one or yourself and make sure that they aren't, codependent, you're an enabler, all of I'm going to call it negative language, kind of blaming and shaming language about that, and that they're really supportive from a different lens. So, and I always say, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me. We're working on training more therapists to be prodependent aligned, and many of them are resonating with it. So as Kim shared, she was like, oh, he wrote what I, have been thinking, and gave it a framework. And many people are saying that. In fact, they're going, he wrote the book I should have written. It's kind of funny. So, but good, good that we're making some progress with it. And most of the time, there's been a few resistant therapists that's their issue. Those would be the ones I'll never refer people to. But, you know, hopefully as they're learning more, they're really looking at it from a different lens. So we do have some questions. So the first one is, can we talk about trauma bonding as a codependent issue? So first of all, we don't talk about codependence. We really talk about it from a prodependent standpoint, but maybe you've got how it's been viewed in the codependent framework. However you'd like to answer this.
Right. So it's exactly what I was thinking. I'm not sure if you kind of want to hear it from a codependent, or if you want to compare and contrast maybe from a codependent and a prodependent perspective. What I can tell you is trauma bonding is a real thing. It does happen. And when we refer to trauma bonding, we actually connect with our pain, with someone who causes us pain. And sometimes that can cause us issues in our life. We might feel very uncomfortable in situations with people, and environments that are deeply connected to traumatic events in our life. From a prodependent perspective, let me rewind. From a codependent perspective, there would be some negativity around that. Because you've had traumatic events, and because you've bonded with your trauma, you're most likely going to make unhealthy decisions for yourself, because that's your brokenness, that's your woundedness, that you're going to be making decisions out of that woundedness. And on some level, there are some cases where there's familiarity. There is some familiarity with, our history and our trauma. I can see areas in my life where my personality formed around some of my trauma. I learned how to caretake, and I learned how to, and you could look at that negatively, or you could look at that like, well, that's just how my life, that's just how I am. I don't think that's a pathology. I think I have to have good boundaries, and I have to be aware of situations that come up where I don't want to replay my history, or I want to, or if I'm in a situation, I don't always have to connect it to my trauma. That's not always the case. There are people who have trauma bonds that don't necessarily repeat behavior. They can get into a relationship with somebody who just makes bad decisions. That can happen. So we're so tempted, I think, to want to explain everything. We want to put everything in a box and categorize it and put a name and a number and a code and a price on it. And what I think we're figuring out, and I think prodependence speaks to this beautifully, is not every decision we make is based on our, replaying our neuroses and all of our struggle from our past. Yes, there might be some tenets of that, and I might want to really, at some point, work with a therapist and figure out how to make the healthiest decisions for me. But the fact that I learned how to caretake as a younger person in my life, and I still am pretty dang good at loving and taking care of the people I actually see that as a character strength, not a character weakness. I just have to be careful that I'm taking care of myself too, that I'm on that list so that I don't run dry, so my tank doesn't go empty. So trauma bonds in the old-fashioned sense around codependency was really looked at as a deficit in a person. Because I have a trauma bond, I'm going to repeat this, and this is why, and I'm codependent, blah, 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 blah. I'm saying trauma bonds happen. We definitely want to identify those situations. So maybe identify those so that we know how those impacted us, the negative, those situations in our life. But some of the things and some of the outcomes don't have to be negative. They just don't. Not every person is in a relationship with an addict, for instance, because they have a trauma bond as a younger person. Some people legit fall in love with people who struggle, and that's it. Period. End of story. That's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for some therapists because they want to look and analyze, and maybe there's stuff there, but sometimes they've done a lot of work around their past, and it's really not about that. They just love somebody who struggles, so they just got to learn how to be healthy in that relationship. I hope that's helpful.
It's really helpful. And a couple things I heard is, and I think it is a human tendency. I want to know why. and I want to put it in a box, like you said. I want to go, well, because of this, then this, like that there's a cause and effect. And what I'm hearing you say is not necessarily. And what I thought of too, when you were talking about, well, actually this for me has turned into a character strength. And I think that I hadn't really thought about, but I think that's been really true of my life too. There's a lot of things, I think with, character things can be both, can be both, it can, my greatest strengths can also be my weaknesses and things like that. So, but I really liked looking at the trauma bonding and the skills that I've learned, as, oh gosh, there is strength in that, because I do know how to love these people, and, I agree. We can fall in, how do we know who we fall in love with? We see something in them, and maybe other people don't always see it, but we see something in them, and we see something that we want to nurture or whatever, and hopefully they want to nurture us in whatever way too. And, Dr. Rob talks about, the mixes, and, if you're a 4 and you're partnered with a 5, you guys can, raise yourself up to 6s and 7s or something, so the pair of us can, help and support and raise each other up, as well. I'm sure we can also tear each other down if we choose to do that. But I really like, instead of always looking at it as a negative, let's look at the flip side of that.
Right. And the other thing that kind of goes along with what we're talking about is, our newest research is a lot to do with attachment. So it's not always trauma related, in the sense that sometimes, we're meant for attachment. We're meant to attach. We're meant to have a primary bond, and primary bonds in our life. That's what keeps us stable and grounded. And sometimes those bonds get rocked. They get rocked by addiction. They get rocked by betrayal. They get rocked by, a variety of things, health problems, to who knows what. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's connected to our past. It could just be, I've connected to this person, and I love them and I care about them, and they're my person. And so when they struggle, I struggle. I want to hold on. I want to try and help and to assist and to try and save that bond and that connection. But that's more from an detachment. And prodependence is definitely an attachment strength-based perspective, where codependency was definitely a deficit trauma-based perspective. There's validity in a lot of what codependency taught, except I think the negativity around how we labeled people who were trying to help. That was ugly, and I think it was just, I couldn't explain it any other way. So it must be because you're broken too. Broken finds broken. And I think that is the most negative, damaging message that codependent gave, because there's no hope in that. If I am inherently broken because of my trauma or my history or I chose this person, so there's something wrong with me, well, what hope do I have of a healthy relationship? And if I'm always going to act in broken ways, and I just don't think that's true. Because, and I say that not just because I feel it, but I say it because I see it. I see people get better. I see people heal regardless of their history, regardless of the trauma they've been through. I've seen people reattach and have very healthy, successful relationships. And I've been doing this a long time. So, and I've seen me be able to attach and have healthy relationships, and I probably shouldn't have. So, I think there's a lot of walking proof that you're not forever broken. And we just sometimes have to be more aware, depending on our experiences, that we're putting ourselves on the list. Yeah.
I love that, being more aware too, because I mean, there's stuff that comes up, for me, and like, I just have to be aware of this, that this is something, that I have to choose, but I can choose, to do it differently, and it gives me space. And it also gives me encouragement when I choose to do it differently, that I'm making some progress. Like, I love what you're sharing about, like, I should, theoretically, I shouldn't be able to do any of this stuff. And, I've got some great, healthy relationships in my life too. And I'm, And at the end of the day, that's what I care about, is those healthy relationships. So we've got another question here. This is an important one. How do you deal with ongoing resentment with all of this? Even if your partner is in good recovery, it feels like it'll never stop. Now, this partner does not identify how long the good recovery has lasted. So let's talk a little bit about time frames and, you know, how to move through resentment, etc.
I'm really glad you asked this question, because I think it's one of the things that I witnessed that is the most painful for a partner. Because when the addict or the struggling person in their life decides to actually do their work and get better, I sometimes am still left with this residual resentment and residual yuck in the basement, so to speak. So I should be, you know, forgiving and letting go and moving on and being grateful, but I still hold, you know, I still don't feel that. And sometimes that can lead partners to shame, you know, start shaming myself, start being hard on myself. I should be nicer, I should be better, I should be kinder, I should be more forgiving, more Christ-like, whatever, you know, whatever those things that we may use to judge ourselves. I want to say the thing that comes up for me as you're asking the question is, be gentle with yourself, because grieving the losses from addiction and healing those losses and working through those through the grief process is just like any other grief. It's like death. It's like death of the life you thought you had, death of the marriage, the relationship, the family, that picture that you thought you had, kind of the death of that and the rebuilding of something new. And everybody heals at a different rate with that. And sometimes the heart's the last thing to come along, because remember, resentment falls under a kind of that anger umbrella. That's kind of a subsidiary of anger. And anger is sometimes things we use to protect ourselves, that emotion. It's a protective emotion. And so you might not be ready to get all the way vulnerable yet. So you're holding on to your resentment to create some distance, because maybe you're afraid that it'll fall back into where it was, or maybe you're just not there yet. I think the fact that you recognize it and you're owning it is a huge step towards resolving it. You'll want to resolve that no matter how the relationship ends up, because it sets your own heart free. But don't pressure yourself on timing. I think when partners pressure themselves on timing, or family members, it actually prolongs it. It actually makes it longer, if that makes sense. So be really gentle and really kind, a lot of self-compassion. I would work again with a qualified and skillful therapist that can help you maybe figure out what's underlying all the resentment, what my fears are, what my insecurities are, maybe help you grieve that. Find ways, tools, interventions that might help you walk that path. But there is another side.
And I was thinking, you know, one of the things that I found is that the partner's healing lags behind the addicts, and it's understandable, because they, you know, you can't go, well, there's been discovery, now I'm in recovery, and now I'm trustworthy. That isn't the case, you know. So there's, you know, there's this time frame, and, you know, Dr. Rob talks about, you know, it can be a year and a half, you know, and that's of consistent recovery, where it's, you know, it's not like the relapse cycle where it's, you know, oh, every 3 months there's a relapse. And so, you know, it resets the clock on that. So, but, you know, I love what you're talking about with the grief work, and it really is, it's a grieving process. And, you know, and, you know, it is grieving the loss of what I thought I had, grieving the loss of the relationship, grieving the loss of this, you know, person who I thought had my back, you know, grieving the loss of who I thought I was within this, you know. I mean, there's on so many different levels. You know, it's really challenging. And yeah, I 100%, you know, my anger and resentment, I've said this before, was absolutely a cover for hurt. I was so hurt, and I didn't want to be hurt. I didn't want to let you hurt me. So I'm going to be angry at you, because that felt more powerful. And so when I finally learned that, I mean, it was really hard to be able to accept that, that I'm hurt. And, you know, I didn't want to be a victim. I don't want any of that kind of stuff. So I'd rather be big and, you know, to just go, I'm hurt, you know, I'm hurt, I'm owning it. And it was hard.
I think too, to piggyback on that, sometimes the residue and the residual of resentment in the relationship after betrayal, it's that false sense of protection that somehow if I hold that wall, it's going to help that individual understand the depth of hurt that they caused me. But really, it's kind of a prison of its own that we sort of create sometimes. I'm not saying it doesn't need its due course, but also I just want to reiterate that whether or not we choose to drop resentment, you always have choices. Sometimes it feels like if I give up if I give that up, maybe then I'm going to be subject to hurt again. And the truth is, we're all subject to hurt, regardless if I hold on to resentment or not. So is resentment helpful for me, useful for me? Is it causing me more pain than I want it to? I always have the ability to make choices that I need to for safety. And I don't have to hold on to anger and resentment if I don't want. So sometimes it's a little bit of internal empowering, like, is this really keeping me safe or not? You know, what's the impact of this for me? But I just want to reiterate that that's always a choice, that you can make whatever choice you need. But I've sometimes convinced myself if I hold on to that somehow things aren't going to hurt as much. It's a lot harder for people to hurt you when you're mad at them. It feels less painful. But the truth is, hurt is hurt, and hurt matters, all hurt matters, and hurt just hurts. So I take that for what it's worth, but maybe something to consider.
Well, I like and I hate what you said, because one of the things it reminded me of early in recovery was, you know, from an addiction standpoint, resentments are a huge relapse issue. So, you know, I had resentments and I had to get over them. And what the person told me was, it's a suggested program of recovery. So this person was suggesting that I pray for I pray for good things to happen to the person that I had a resentment against. The other thing they said, and this really upset me, was that I was allowing this person to live rent-free in my brain. And I was like, so you're telling me it's me? I'm like, no, it's definitely them. And they're like, you are permitting this. And I was like, how am I permitting this when they've hurt me, you know? And so they gave me the suggestion that I pray for good things to happen to this person. And at first it was like, it was horrible. I didn't want to do it. But I also didn't want to continue to feel like I did, because I was miserable. You know, that was the bottom line. And they pointed out that person, now this may be different for your situation, but that person didn't even probably know that I had a resentment. It was, you know, it's all me and it's all sad and not feeling good. As you said, yuck. And so, so I was willing at that point. So I started praying for that person, and it changed. And I've used it a number of times, because I still can get resentments. I've used it a number of times, you know, over the course of the years. And, you know, every single time I'm willing, it works. And it doesn't necessarily change anything else. It just changes, you know, my perception of it and my resentment. And I'm grateful. As much as I don't want to pray good things to happen to those people, I also don't want to be burdened. So I'm willing to do that. So a practical tip from someone who was darned unwilling at first, but
Thank you. Yeah.
So on that one, the share was been sober 4 years, but has had relapses, been in recovery 6 months. So unfortunately, you know, the clock is set at like 6 months, and, you know, it is just part of the process, and you get to be angry, you know, I mean, you know, you get to be angry. Now you can do things with the anger that make things worse, you know, or you can do things, but I 100% agree with you too. It's like, if I just try to close it off, it's like the pressure cooker. I've shoved it all in, and then it erupts, and, you know, then I cause chaos, and then I have to go around making amends, and that sucks too. So it's just a lot better for me to do the things I need to do to take care of it. And if it's like I have to go vent to a girlfriend about whatever, fine. We've got drop-in groups, and we started the old lady posse, drop-in group this week. That was awesome. That was awesome. So, we wanted to create safe places where you can vent, share, get support, whatever it is that you need, so that you can function within whatever relationship you have that you need to, in a way that's more constructive for you.
Another tool that I love for me personally, sometimes my anger happens and frustration happens at really inconvenient times when I'm at work, I'm sleeping, it's the middle of the night, whatever. I'm a big writer. I didn't used to be, and I don't mean like I'm a big writer. What I mean is I free write my anger a lot. And I do it on loose leaf note paper so I can shred it. It's not something.
Oh, wow. Great idea.
Or so in the middle of the night when I'm alone, when my head's spinning and I'm in a thing, I just free write. I don't worry about structure and sentence structure and topic sentences and paragraphing or anything. I just write. I just vomit on the page. And at least sometimes it empties a space for me when I feel like it's kind of overwhelming. So it's a basic tool, and it doesn't replace the support of others, but it's something you can do.
Well, and I think that's a lot of it is, just having a variety of tools. So I don't feel like, I've got nothing, that I'm trapped with this stuck between my brains and, leaking everywhere. If I've got, okay, I can call somebody, I can write, I can, I can pray for this. I can do whatever it is, I can do all of them, so, I can write it and call my friend and go, this is what I just wrote, whatever it is that I need to do, that helps me feel different about it. So, and hopefully, with the 6 months, hopefully he's really getting it this time. And, and I share Dr. Rob's books, Out of the Doghouse. It's about rebuilding trust because, gosh, he really needs to rebuild the trust, and, and that will start. I think you'll start going, okay, he said this and he actually did this. He said he was going to do this and he actually did this. Okay, that's good, and if you see those little breadcrumbs so that you can kind of connect the dots and go, he is making progress. It doesn't take it all away, but you can start seeing, that there is hope, more hope.
Well, and remember, this is a trauma not of your making. So it was kind of handed to you. The betrayal was kind of handed to you, a dish you didn't want, for lack of a better word. So also be sure, if you have a good therapist, let your therapist know, I am storing a lot of crap in here. And it will manifest itself in a variety of ways that I've noticed in my own life and in those that I work with. It will start mutating into physical elements. It can mutate it can mutate very easily into depression and other things that maybe won't be chemical, but more situational. So it's worth taking out and looking at. You're living with it anyway. And so as a therapist, that's something that I am more than happy to help somebody navigate. Let's look at it in a safe place. Let's take it out. Let's see how ugly it is. Let's see how big it is. So you're not carrying that and it's not festering inside of you. Even if you aren't able to express that yet to your partner because he or she isn't in a place to hear, isn't safe yet for that, then let's find a place where we can do that. And we work with that and empty it frequently because it fills back up pretty frequently, just because you're not getting a lot of positive feedback in early stages of recovery sometimes. And every time that slip happens, you probably have the idea, yeah, he's been sober, which is great. He has a lot of great sobriety. He's working in recovery. That's all positive. But those slips are essentially like pulling that rug out from under your feet again. So you also have to be very gentle with yourself there and be like, ow, that's a stinger every single time. And I kind of have to go back through that rebuilding process.
So the comment is, most of my resentment is stored internally. I'm the master at keeping my mouth shut. I'm even resentful at how much time his recovery work takes. And, Kim kind of alluded to it too. There's physical, there's autoimmune disease. I mean, there's physical health issues, you know, that a lot of partners experience. And I think it's the perpetual stress. And so I would invite you, because, you know, I do think that just festers and comes out in, you know, in other ways. So I would invite you to find safe places to have that. I have noticed, and Kim may comment on this too, but I think that sometimes partners are afraid that if they start letting it out, it won't stop. You know, like it'll just erupt. And, you know, so like you know, I'm afraid of what will happen if I actually do. You know, have you experienced that too?
Absolutely. And that's why, as a therapist, I try and just create a container. And sometimes I don't have the illusion that we're going to deal with every piece of anger in that moment. But what's the thing that's bugging you the most right now? Is it the fact that there was a slip? Is it the fact that he's gone every night at a meeting or at the therapist or doing his workbook? I should be grateful, but I want to scream at him, you know, because remember the other piece to that, just to maybe de-shame that a little bit, is addiction is a very selfish, self-centered thing to do. I just want to acknowledge that it's based in wounding and all that stuff, but it's very self-centered. So you've probably spent a lot of time disconnected and not knowing why, not having your partner feel present and not knowing why. Is it me? Is it him or her? Like, I can't figure out what's going on. So now they're in recovery and they're busy even more. So now I've dealt with addiction. Now I'm dealing with the abandonment I feel due to recovery. And that's a real thing. So maybe that's just validation that that is not uncommon. I think it's important that if you have the ability to speak to that, even with your partner, to say, I'm grateful you're in recovery, but you got to know you spent a lot of time in your addiction these last several years, and now you're spending a lot of time recovering, and it's hard for me. I feel like I'm the one, you know, and our time and my time gets sacrificed still. Even in your recovery, I'll support you in it, but you got to know how I feel.
And I think that there are ways to, I 100% agree that I think you know, the communication, and do it when you're not in the, you know, the heat of the resentment, if you can, you know, but also offer a solution saying, you know, you know, I understand that you need to do this, but can we schedule some time, you know, for the two of us doing something non-recovery based, that's, you know, go for a walk, or, you know, whatever it is that's good for the two of you to do, you know, that's a safe thing for the two of you to do, you know, so I think that because addicts don't have balance either, you know, so helping, you know, to find, you know, a little bit of that, and, you know, that's going to, and it won't be 100%. And, you know, we talk in, you know, on Dr. Rob's webinar, we've talked about how, you know, you need to have support and the addict needs to have support, and, you know, but, you know, there should be some spots where you can come together and do something, you know, even if it's going out for coffee, you know, and you're just looking across the table from each other or whatever, you know, if you can find some of those connection points, it won't feel, I don't think, you know, so abandoned and so like he's always off doing that. And again, you know, I offer you the various drop-in groups and webinars and things. I'm glad you're here. I'm thrilled you're here. But, you know, there are connection points, and some of the people that are coming to the drop-in groups are finding connections with people and then, you know, chatting or emailing with them outside of the group. So there's another, you know, sponsor or not, but it's still another point of connection, you know, that you've got somebody that you can reach out to. So hopefully that's helpful too.
Good luck with that.
I'm glad you do one of the drop-in groups too. That's great. So yeah, there are a number of different ones, and we're working on adding some more, but you know, the old lady posse group was probably the most requested. Like, I came back after a weekend and I had 3 people going, when's it going to start? So that was kind of interesting, but you know, it's launched and we're looking at adding, you know, some additional support groups. In fact, one of them that they would like to have, and I think this is a great idea too, is just like, you know, for women, and how to build healthy relationships, not even dating necessarily, but just how do you connect with other people, you know, because some of them are just feeling so isolated. So I think that would be, so I'm going to tell you, so if you go to Sex and Relationship Healing, actually I'll put it up there, because it's on the webinars. I'll put the link on, but yeah, all of the stuff is on here. But it's, so the Old Lady Posse is on Tuesday mornings at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time. And it's a drop-in group, so you can see each other like, Kim and I are seeing each other right now. And you can share. And I think everybody ended up turning on their camera. There was one person that was there by phone, but otherwise everybody else turned on their camera so that you could actually see each other. And it was really, it was really good. And what I'll tell you, what Old Lady Posse is, they wanted that name because I was going to, they're like, no. And, so it's, if you're of a certain age, if you feel like you qualify, you probably qualify. If you have been in a longer term relationship, and whether you stay or go is irrelevant. But if you were in a longer term relationship and, things just are, they wanted to have a space where they could meet, but also some accountability to each other. So this one will be a little different than some of the other drop-in groups where it's more about sharing and support. This one, like if you say, I would like some accountability, I want to set some boundaries about this, great. That's so if you can copy that link that I just posted in there, that'll get you to all of the webinars and drop-in groups. So hopefully you can grab that. I'm going to try to grab your email address too, but anyway, that's just want you to know about that. But again, other webinars and other support on this site, but hopefully you're getting some other connections as well. So
yeah, and the workbook we're working on has a whole section on anger, just as general information for all of you. Anger is a really important thing to recognize in the healing process from betrayal, how it functions in your life, how it's functioned up to that point, and how it functions currently. And self-awareness is how, the negative impacts that can have on you, not to take anger away, because you have the right to anger, and anger will happen for most, if not everyone, everybody who goes through this, but just a self-awareness about how to manage it, how to handle it, what to do with it, how to stay aware of it, and what place it has in Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that she's the one who came up with the grief cycle. Anger is a really important part of the grief cycle. And sometimes people stay in anger longer than others, but the next, like, moving past anger would be moving into acceptance. And some people kind of vacillate back and forth between anger and acceptance. I'm great. I accept the situation I'm in, that this is how it is. And then I go right back to anger and go, nope. I don't want. So that's pretty normal to vacillate between sadness and anger and acceptance, and then surrender and gratitude. All those things, it's pretty normal to bounce in that process back and forth between those different feelings and emotions and experiences. Because it is, like I said, when we started, it is about loss.
yeah, and so if you are feeling like, why am I not over this? Or your loved one is, your addict is going, why aren't you over this? Because you're not over this, and I don't even know if you get over it. I think you go through it, don't you, kind of think?
Yes, I do. I think Dr. Rob says this quite frequently. We don't heal trauma, we manage it. We learn where to put it, how to cope with the things that we've been given and the experiences that we've had in our life, how to make sense out of it, and maybe even how to create meaning out of it. That's how we manage it. That's where we put it someplace where we can deal, where it's not coming and poking at us all the time. So my life experiences, the traumatic ones that are still there, I'm fully aware of what they are. They haven't somehow magically disappeared into the sky. They're still there. They just don't have as much power over me as they have at different points in my life. And I've learned what to do with those, as I've just learned how to become more aware of when they're present. And when I love Troy Love, who's one of the facilitators of the webinars here on sex and relationship. He talks a lot about wounds getting bumped. And I think that's a really good way to put it. How often I go through my life and all of a sudden somebody bumps an old wound. Maybe it's just the way they said something, or how they showed up, or maybe it's a criticism or an experience I've had. All of a sudden it bumps this old stuff in me. That doesn't necessarily, again, doesn't mean I'm broken. Doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It means that's a legitimate experience that I've had to go through in my life. I just have to be sure and separate the two and recognize, oh, this is where that's coming from. This is why I want to rage or be resentful or do whatever it is, or shut down or not be honest or whatever, where my healing person inside of me would say, oh, what do you need to do to take care of yourself? What boundary might you need here? Be sure that you recognize this person's not this person. These are two separate people. They just bump that wound. They bump that hurt that you are very familiar with, because it's a part of the tapestry of your life. And I tend to think that's sort of beautiful, because I think that's what life is. It's a series of events that happen, and we have to figure out how to make that something that's meaningful in our life. Viktor Frankl, a writer, a Holocaust survivor, said that we can survive almost any pain and suffering in our life as long as we can attach meaning to it and make it meaningful in our life. Then there's very few things we can't survive. And I have found that to be true. I think most people who have done that as well find that to be true. And in your healing process, that's part of what you're going to want to ask yourself is, where do I put this so that I'm not feeling like I'm bleeding all the time, bleeding out this wound all the time? What do I need to do? How do I create meaning out of this for myself? Obviously, I chose to be a therapist, and that helps remind me of my healing and helps keep me centered and grounded, hopefully, and understanding and remembering where I've come from and my experiences that hopefully will bless the lives of other people. But that's not the only way. There's a million ways. I may need to create. I may need to provide some other kind of, I don't know what that means for everybody, but I think it's something you want to be exploring as you go through the process, so that it's something you can put into that tapestry that won't knock you down every time you think about it, that won't take you out, that you can go, oof, that pinches. I remember that was really hard, or, but I'm still breathing. I'm still going, and I'm going to keep breathing, and I'm going to keep learning from my experiences as I go. And this is one of those big bumps in the road. It's huge if you've experienced betrayal. But I see people heal all the time from it. I say that frequently as a therapist. This would be the worst job ever if I didn't see healing. I would have quit long ago. So I still see hope. Not everybody chooses the path of healing, and I understand that too, but those who do and put in their time, miracles happen.
And I agree. And like you said, I very much try to take the things that have been the most painful for me and look for meaning, and how can I use that ultimately I like it. If I can help others, that's great. And the last hugest thing I had a couple years ago was a betrayal, not my husband. He's really good. I always want to clarify with that, but it was it was a work situation, and the level of betrayal was painful, just painful. And what it gave me was I got to be honest, it gave me a better appreciation for the betrayal that, partners go through. I always knew on some level, but to experience that, was a completely different thing. And, I really do get it better now. And, I hope I convey that, I really do. In my perfect world, we'd be here. First of all, there would never be addiction and people would be nice to each other, but
Right.
That's not going to happen. So, but like, I really want you all to know that there's support and there's hope and there's help. I love what Kim was talking about, is like, who would want to do any of this if we didn't believe that there's hope? And I have seen lots of miracles happen, and it isn't that it never goes back to the way it was. And because everybody's different people, and thank goodness, because the way it was somebody that had an attachment disorder and wasn't able to really connect. So hopefully both people are moving forward in a different path, eyes wide open, but finding a path of honesty and integrity. And I'm choosing to be in this relationship now, even though it's been hard, even though it's been messy, but I'm choosing to be here. I'm choosing to walk alongside you, and that's, ideally both people. Not every relationship makes it, but, if they do, I honestly see so many that are so much stronger, as a result. So.
Well, and I want you guys to walk away too with this understanding today. I love, Dr. Rob says this much more eloquently than I do, but he says quite frequently, I think it's so important that you walk away knowing that because you are a betrayed partner does not mean that you are broken, wounded, unable to heal, and that you were destined to be betrayed. It doesn't mean any of that. And he says it, I probably won't hit all the points, but all the areas, but he says you can definitely love the wrong person for you. You can definitely give love where none is deserved. You can definitely love maybe at the wrong time, in the wrong, ineffective ways, but you can never love too much. Anybody that tells you that that's a thing, it's not a thing. It's just not a thing. I think that we have to learn how to love in the most healthy way for ourselves. We have to learn how to heal in the healthiest way for ourselves. But the fact that y'all are here and that you're dealing with betrayal on whatever level you're dealing with it, just means that you love somebody, and you're hurting because you love them. That's what it means. That's it.
And I think you still, I mean, if you're still in the relationship, you still see, the things that you loved about that person. So you see a broken person, but you still see the other. Like, relationships, in my opinion, aren't just black and white. Like, oh, now this person was all good, I married him, and now he's all bad. Like, no, it's way more nuanced than that. And I think our loved ones, can get on one side of the fence and go, you should dump them, you should, the shoulds. And I think it's like, we get to choose, and, how can we support each of you, as you're doing this. So this person says, I really appreciate this group, adding it to my list, and thank you for such meaningful and useful information. I appreciate the time you've given to help others. Thank you for being here. That's what we're just grateful you're here too. So.
Yes, please come back. I'm only here every other week. I don't know if it would be useful to have me here more often. I'd be interested to know, those of you who are attending, if that would be useful. I'm considering it. Maybe trying to get on here every week, or maybe a little bit more available. I know there's lots of wonderful groups, so I don't think but if that would be useful, please pipe in and let me know. And I know I had a colleague, Matt Wheeler, fill in for me, and we've talked about tag teaming back and forth maybe. So I'm just interested and open to feedback there if anybody has any.
One person said yes, yes, yes with, I can't even count how many exclamation points. So, and another person, yes, please be here more often. So,
okay.
So Kim, I'm kind of thinking it's yes. So, and I, from my standpoint, like, it's, I texted Kim and go, we're on today, right? So a little bit of it is, it's the first and third Wednesdays, and how can we do that? So we'll look at the schedule. It will get added to the schedule, so that that link I put in the chat, that is always where things are updated as to where you can find us and when. So
because this is a Q&A, if we do it, I mean, I will rely on a lot of you to come with your questions. Just like today, it was wonderful. Like, that's where we learn the most. I don't usually learn from lecturing or talking. I really learn from the interaction, and I am more than happy to impart any knowledge that I have gained over the many years working. And I'm also happy to admit that I don't know. I don't know, and there's plenty of things I don't know, but this is something that I do know quite a bit about. And I love what I do. I love who I work with. I love working with this issue. And I'm so excited about prodependence and pushing that out there in the world, and getting codependence, being respectful.
Banished.
Sharing it forever so that we can move on into something else.
And so for those of you here that are going to the drop-in groups, I would ask that you invite other partners to participate, because I mean, that's what's really helpful for us, is we want to continue to grow all the groups. I was talking to somebody else earlier, and I was like, oh, I think it might have been Kim. No, it was somebody else. I got another, sorry, but we're talking, like, there should be 1 million people on these things, quite frankly, because there's lots and lots and lots of people that are, have been through betrayal, and, that could benefit from the support. So us getting the message out to different people so that they join us, this is all free, so you please help us spread the word, anywhere, you're going, that somebody could, you could say, hey, check this out, if they check it out and hate it, okay, but.
And for therapists like me, I mean, I see people one-on-one and in groups in my little area, in my little corner of the world, which I'm grateful for. But to have the opportunity, Rob's provided an opportunity for many of us to you know, to reach further and take our experience and reach a bigger audience, and for those that this might be useful to. So please spread the word. And it doesn't only have to be sex addiction or partners of sex addicts. It can be alcoholism, or, you know, chronic mental illness, chronic depression, or bipolar, or gambling, or anything that just creates a sense of betrayal and helplessness, hopelessness in the relationship. That's what I do. That's what many of us do. And prodependence is an umbrella that covers all of that. So please invite people, and I will work on scheduling, see if I can get here more often. Thank you.
We'll work on it together. Thanks very much, everybody. Until next time.
Have a good day.